Hello everyone, my name is Felix and I'll be teaching you guys about APIs. If you haven't heard that term before, that's completely fine because I'll be showing you guys what an API is, some use cases for APIs, and I'll give you a few examples of that, and then I'll show you guys how you can use an API for yourself. So what is an API? API stands for Application Programming Interface, and they work behind the scenes and they allow different applications and programs to connect to each other and work together to perform tasks or other things. APIs are often used to get data from different sources and put them all in one place, like a UI or user interface, which is used for humans to interact with applications. An API is an interface for machines and computers to interface with each other. Let me give you an example here. Up on the screen here, I have Google News. So here, Google uses APIs to fetch news articles from all over different websites and show them all on the same place. So you see here, we have an article from CBC, National Post, Global News. So they get data from all over the place and they bring it all into one place here, and they show it in a nice way. I have two more examples of APIs here. So here, if you search for weather just on Google, you'll get this nice little display with the weather and the 7-day forecast or whatever. Actually 8 days. So Google doesn't actually get this data themselves. They use an API, and you can see down here they link weather.com. So they use weather.com's API to gather this data and display it on the front page of Google. Another example here on this website called PC Part Picker. Here you can see prices for this CPU. You can see prices for it on different vendors' websites. So here you can see Amazon, Best Buy, Walmart, and Newegg. You can see they all have the same price, but PC Part Picker will use APIs from Amazon, from Best Buy, and from Walmart to all gather their prices and display it here in one place to make it easier for you to make a decision on from where to buy the piece. So yeah, those are three examples of APIs. I hope you understand a bit more what they are and how they're used. I think is very exciting because it allows you to use information that you normally wouldn't be able to gather yourself, you know. So I think that's pretty exciting, and that gives you a lot of opportunities to make some pretty cool things. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is HTTP requests. HTTP requests are how computers communicate over the internet, and pretty much anything you do on a web browser uses HTTP requests to load websites and get files and stuff like that. So let me show you a little example here. Chrome has this nice little tool where you can see all the HTTP requests being made from your computer. So right here, all the requests that my computer makes will show up here. Right now there's none because nothing's really happening. But if I reload this page, you can see a bunch of stuff is happening. And that's just because lots of things happen when you load a web page. But the only important one we need to look at right now is the top one, where it loads the actual web page of google.com. So this means that my computer made an HTTP request to google.com, and google.com responded with all the information required to show this web page. And we can look a bit deeper into that. There's different parts to a request that are required, and some of them are shown here. So the first one here is the destination, basically. So the URL to where the request is being sent. In this case, it's just google.com. The method of the request, this most commonly will either be get, which is used to get data, like we want to do when we load a web page. We want to get the information required to load this page. And then there's also post is the other method, and post is made for sending data. instead of receiving data, you're sending data. But we'll mostly be using get. Post is a bit more advanced. This status code is actually part of the response. So this is what Google will respond with. And the status code just helps you know what the status is essentially of the request. And there's different codes that mean different things. And 200 is the OK code. It means that everything went well and nothing went wrong. There's also another common one is 404. So 404 means not found, and that's an error code. So if you see 404, that means that something went wrong and you couldn't find the resource you're looking for. So that's useful in code to check if the request happened successfully or not. These two don't matter. At least you don't need to worry about it. The response headers, you don't need to worry about that either. And the request headers, yeah, nothing important here either. So now I want to look at the response, because the response is where the data is, and that's the most interesting part. So here you can see the response. This is the raw response that google.com sent back to my computer. And this is just the raw HTML code required to display this website. So it looks like jumbo to us because we're not a computer and we can't read it. But if you go to preview over here, you can see that this is what the web page will actually look like, and that's what's displayed on the main screen here as well. So the reason I'm showing you guys this is because you use HTTP requests to access APIs as well. So in the same way that we made a request to google.com to get the information required to display this website, we can make a request to an API, and the API will respond with the data basically that you're asking for. And that data will be different depending on what the API is built for or what it's meant for. So one thing that isn't really shown in this example is parameters. So you can send in data with the request, and this is a bit like parameters in a method. The response will be different depending on the parameters you pass into it. So for example, if you have an API that provides, well, the first one we're going to work with is a stock API. So say the API will get the current price of a certain stock. Well, you can pass in the name of the stock or the symbol of the stock as a parameter, and then the API will respond with the current price of that stock that you specified in the parameters that you sent in with the request. So now why don't I give you an example of actually using an API? So my example is going to be a stock API. So, and the API is provided by FinHub. I don't know what FinHub is, but they provide a stock API. So normally the first thing you want to do when finding an API is creating an account. Most APIs will require you to create an account, unfortunately. But down here I see get free API keys, so that's very nice. And yeah, so you'll need to sign up. They don't need much: name, email, password. You can probably use a fake email or something, but anyway, so you sign up. I've already got one, so I can just sign in and log in. And right away, it brings you to this screen where it shows you a key and a sandbox key. You won't need the sandbox key. It's for testing, but this key is very important here. And this key is what identifies you when you make a request to FinHub. And you'll need to provide this key every time you make a request in those parameters we talked about earlier. And it's a good idea to keep this secret, because if someone else finds your key, they can use it. And sometimes if the API is not free, if you're paying for the API and someone else finds your key, that's not good. The next thing you want to find is the documentation. So again, there's a nice little button here for the documentation. What the documentation will do, it'll show you exactly how the API is supposed to be used and what it can be used for. So let's just start from the top here, because most of these are important. First thing we want to look at is the base URL, and this is basically the destination to where our HTTP requests will be sent. And it says base because this API provides many different services, and every service will have a slightly different destination, but they'll all start with this. I should mention that the base URL will be added after the main URL, which is finhub.io in this case. So the base URL is actually finhub.io/API/v1. And then after that, slash whatever service you want to actually access. And we'll look into that later. So authentication, this is important. This is where you provide your API key, what I was talking about earlier. This is where you provide the token parameter, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Rate limits, this is important because most APIs have a limit to how many requests you can make. This one is looks like it's 30 API calls per second, which is plenty for our uses. Sandbox, you don't need to worry about that. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is here. So now, say we want to use this API to get the current price of a stock. So I want to look for that service. So I'm going to look down the side here. Stock fundamentals, stock estimates, stock price. Okay, good. Quote. Yeah, so okay, so what if I want to get a quote for a stock price? So here we can see a bit of information about this specific service. It says get real-time quote data for US stocks. Okay, cool. And you can see the method here, they want you to use the get method, which is quite common. And here you can see examples of the end of the destination URL with this specific service. So you see it's /quote. So we'll want to add this at the end of the base URL. So the entire URL we'll make our request to will be finhub.io/API/v1/quote. And actually you can see up here in this example, even though it's in Python, it'll still be the same destination URL. And there it is right there. Next thing is arguments or parameters. So they want you to provide a symbol, which is the symbol of the stock. So like Apple is AAPL and AMD is AMD. But don't forget, you'll also need to pass in the token parameter because that one is required with every single request you make. And actually over here in the example, you can see that they do provide a token. So they provide both the symbol and the token. And down here, this is the most important information that documentation will give you. And that's how the response will be shaped. And this is what a response will look like. And the data is ordered in name and value pairs. So these are the names of the values, and these are the values themselves. And down here you can see what every name means. So O is the opening price of the day, H is the high price of the day, L is the low price, and C is the current price. So this is what we'll actually want to get. So this will show you exactly what the response means, and that's very important. So why don't we try making a request to this API right now? So let's make a new tab, and let's make an HTTP request to the destination URL to get a quote of the price of a stock. So I'm going to go finhub.io, it's right there, /API/v1. So this is the base URL. And now I want to access a specific service. And I want to access the quote service. So I'm going to go /quote. And then now to specify that we're done with the destination and we want to start declaring parameters, you put a question mark. So this is kind of the divider between the destination and the parameters. So first we want to, the quote service requires the symbol. So we go symbol, move my mouse. So symbol is equal to, the symbol of the stock we want. Let's say Apple, so AAPL. And then we also need to provide the token parameter. So the way to add another one is you do, I think these are called ampersands or something. The and symbol. So this kind of separates the two parameters. And then we can go token is equal to, And now we want to go back to FinHub and grab our API key. Here we go. So this is my key. I copy this string, go back to where I'm making the request, and I paste it after token equal. So now I'm going to press enter, and this is going to make an HTTP request to this specific API. I'm going to press enter, and boom. We have some data, but I'm going to pull up this little tab again that I use with Google to show you exactly how this request is the same and also how it's different than Google's. So I just restarted it, or I just reloaded the page, sorry. And we can see here we have a request. Let me go back to Google so we can compare easily. So this is for Google. We can see the request URL here is for Google, and here it's basically what we have in the URL bar. So it's finhub.io, the destination for the service we want to access in this API, and then our parameters that follow the question mark. And we can see that the request is get, because anything we put in this URL bar our browser will make a get request to that address. So that's get, that's good. We can see the status code is 200 because everything happened successfully. There were no errors and we got our data. These two we can skip. But if we go back to Google, we can see that these two are the same. Now in Google's request, let's look at the response. So here for Google, the response was a bunch of HTML. We can't read this. We don't know what it does. However, if we look at FinHub's response, we can see we have some data here, and it's actually what's written up here, except if I go to preview, it's a bit nicer to see, and we can see that we have some numbers. And notice that they match up exactly, or not exactly, but they're the same values that FinHub is showing in their documentation. And we know that the C here stands for the current price. So we know that the current price of the Apple stock is right now is $131.79. And of course, there's a bunch of other data we can get here as well. So now if this request was being made in a program, we would read this data that we got in the response and do whatever you want with it. You can show it in a nice way in an application, or you can use it to compute a calculation. I don't know, whatever you want to do with it, it's your choice. So now that we've made one request to a specific service within an API, you can have fun and look at all the other services that you can use. Note that some of them require a premium, which is paid. So that's not as fun, but there's some pretty cool things you can do with just the free version as well. Okay, so that'll be it for my explanation of APIs and how to use them. I hope you learned something, and next we'll look into actually using these APIs in C# and in an application instead of just running the request in a browser here. So stay tuned for the next video.